for joining the webinar. We'll be definitely answering all the questions by the end in the Q&A part. We have Ankit here.
Yeah,
Ankit, please take over and introduce
sure.
the.
Yeah. Good evening, Andrew. Good evening, Abdul Sabur. Thank you all for joining. Good evening, Anjali. Welcome. Welcome, Chutan. Welcome, Cindy. Daniel, thank you for joining. We'll be waiting for a few more minutes for the rest of the participants to join. And in the meantime, why don't we introduce ourselves to all the participants who have joined the call? I would request you to share some insights about your profile, which industry you are all from, what is the work experience that you all have. Please go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat section. It's open for you all. Can be a good networking opportunity as well. Welcome, Charlotte. Welcome, Awad. Welcome, Anjali. Good evening, Awad. Hi, Divik. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining, Joey. Thank you for joining, Alvin. Andrew, good evening. Yeah, I think we have a decent number of participants now. So, yeah, let's start with the webinar. So, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the call. Welcome to your pre-program information webinar on machine learning and data analytics using Python by NUS School of Computing. Now, in this session, let me start off by firstly introducing you all to Emeritus, right? So many of you might be already aware about Emeritus, but for those who are not aware, Emeritus was founded back in 2015. Since then, we have established a global presence. We operate on a global level. We are an online learning platform, and we operate in Latin America, North America, Europe, Middle East, and the Asia Pacific region. Now we partner with top tier universities like NUS, SMU, Cambridge, Harvard to offer multiple courses, even region specific courses in multiple languages. Till date, we have helped more than 250,000 learners globally to achieve their learning objectives. Having said that, let me also introduce you to NUS School of Computing. Most of you might already be aware about NUS School of Computing. It was established to train business leaders and computing professionals about the ever emerging technology domain. And it has been doing so successfully from the past 4 decades now. So the certification that you're going to be receiving here is also going to be issued to you by NUS School of Computing. So let's set up the agenda for the call. So I'll be first introducing you to the speaker of our session. Then our speaker will be taking over and he will be giving you a brief insight on what exactly is the current market demand of machine learning and data analytics. He'll be also giving you some insights about the program details, curriculums, who this program is a right fit for, and he'll be also discussing a few key takeaways for this course. At the end, I'll walk you through I'll show you a small snippet of the certification that you will receive. And there is a small surprise for all the participants who have taken out time and joined our session today at the end of the call. Finally, we'll be wrapping up our call with a quick Q&A session at the end. Okay, so here we go. Yes. So let me introduce you to our speaker for the day, Carmen. Carmen Taglienti is actually a Chief Data Officer and Data AI Portfolio Director for Insight Solutions. He has more than 25 years of experience as a data science, data analytics, and data management expert. He is also a lecturer at UC Berkeley Merrimack College, where he teaches courses on data science, data management, data governance, law, and ethics as well. He is also a published author and he speaks at big technical and industrial events globally. So, welcome, Carmen. Thank you so much for joining the call. Now, to give some insights on the machine learning side, I would request you to take over.
Sure. Thank you all. Thank you, Ankit, and thank you all for joining today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the course, the market, and how things are working. Oh, Ankit, do you want me to share my screen, or are you going to run the slides?
Yeah, I can run the slides for you.
Okay. Yeah, if you go to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, so first we want to start with market demand. Talk a little bit about why is this course relevant? Why are these the kinds of things that we're focusing on as it relates to industry, but also your own professional backgrounds? Why would you want to be learning in this topic area? So across the globe, we've been seeing machine learning data analytics, of course, over the last few years with generative AI, we've seen a big change as it relates to the use of AI within an industry. But this phenomenon has been happening for probably, I would say, 20 years. So we've been seeing a lot of use as it relates to bringing data and data assets to the fore as it relates to businesses and thinking about how they can use data to become more competitive and also to drive the kind of operational efficiencies that they would expect within a business. So what has happened over the course of the last few years is that machine learning and data analytics has become a little bit more accessible with generative AI and other computing kinds of advances. And so here, competitive advantage is really focused around analyzing and processing data, which I'm sure you're all aware at this point. Some of the challenges tend to be focused around how do I access that data? How do I use that data? How can I be productive? And that's really what we'll be talking about in terms of not only market demand, but what can you learn in order to make you more effective professional in this space? Now, one of the other things that has become pretty popular over the course of the last probably, again, 10 years has been Python. So Python is ranked as one of the most demanded programming languages across the globe as well. And I've seen this change happen over time as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about get going, but it's not only used by software developers, but also by professionals like all of us as we think about just applying the kinds of techniques that I've been describing in order to create competitive advantage or operational efficiency within your business. It's being used for that even from business folks so that it's relatively easy for you to say, run a Python program or create a Python program that allows you to be able to perform the kinds of analysis that you would think you would like to do as it relates to your business. So here, just some statistics. The market is, as it relates to machine learning, it's expected to grow from 21 billion to about 209 billion by 2029. So this is a significant increase, and I'm sure all of you have seen this. We're seeing this increase probably month over month, actually. So we're seeing big, big changes as it relates to machine learning use cases, the application of generative AI. And then, of course, what supports that is the data analytics market. And so we think about data management, data analytics that go with it. So again, this is a compound annual growth rate of about 30%, which is significant. And these are the kinds of things where we don't want to be on the sidelines as things are changing as it relates to the way that the market is adapting to the use of data and the use of machine learning in order to be able to, as I said before, be more competitive from a business perspective. That's really the key. And then also all of us want to ensure that we are able to participate in this. And that's really an important part of this course. And then Python, of course, as I mentioned earlier, it's the world's most popular programming language. And it's taken over things like Java over the last few years. And I'm sure it will continue to remain in its position probably for the next, I would say, decade again. But it's just the kinds of things where we can use it to be able to expand our knowledge and to be able to express the kinds of programs and analytics that we would like in order to drive our businesses forward. Next slide, Ankit.
Yeah.
Okay, so of course, NUS School of Computing, as we think about, well, why learn from this particular type of environment? Well, it has to do with thinking about learning from the best universities in the world. And so here we're talking about NUS School of Computing, and it's ranked #1 as it relates to computer science and information systems worldwide university rankings, and then also for computer rankings in 2023 by subject in the area of computer science. So the professors that you'll be hearing from as it relates to the recorded content is part of this course. The lectures that are being provided to you will be given to you by some of the best in the world from a leading global university that's able to provide information to you with high degrees of accuracy and relevancy to your particular learning experience. Next slide. Okay, so who's the program for? So it's designed for professionals without prior coding experience. And there's a little bit of an asterisk here. You can see this at the bottom, but it basically talks about you really don't have to have any prior coding experience. There are some things you'll be learning a programming language. So some of it is to focus on helping you to understand how to program. So we will have some bootcamp style material provided to you, which will help you to be able to understand Python, for example, but other different techniques that allow you to be able to perform the kinds of machine learning and analytics that you would need. Some of them are not as coding focused as Python. Others are, of course, Python related. But I think what you'll find, and I've taught this course several times before, this is really the kind of environment where you can learn incrementally as you go through the process. And I'll get into this a little bit later. We support you through weekly office hours. So the weekly office hours will help you to be able to understand what are the particular concepts that you need to learn. And then some of it will be part of practicing on your own. There's lots of hands-on that will help you to understand the particular topic area, and you'll need to make sure that you practice, and that's really just part of it. So this is a really important part of understanding the course. It's not just the fact that you're learning a programming language, it's also you're giving the opportunity to practice, and that I think is the best part of the learning process overall. But these are definitely targeted toward people who want to pivot into a machine learning career, to make sure that you understand how to perform these kinds of analytics using coding and other kinds of tools in order to be able to leverage machine learning capabilities, acquire the concepts and techniques as part of becoming more of a machine learning or data science type role, and then gaining experience so that you can lead and solve real world business problems, which is really the key here. And so a lot of it has to do with understanding how can I apply data to be able to solve particular types of business problems or understand the kinds of business problems that I might be looking at in terms of exploratory style analysis in order to determine what should my organization do. So these are things that you'll learn how to do. And there's even a capstone project that's part of it where you get to apply some of these things to be able to understand how can I apply these techniques across the board so that I know what to do in a real world situation. And of course, we'll talk a lot about different kinds of industries that can use these kinds of services in order to be successful. One of the things that we'll do, especially in office hours, I know I've done this in the past, is that we talk about particular types of situations that you might have, for example, within your own industry. And you'll see a lot of parallels across multiple industries as they think about these use cases. But it's important to understand how to sort of contextualize this within your own area. Not everybody comes from the same industry, so it's important to understand how can I apply these techniques within my own domain. Next slide. Okay, so what are some of the key takeaways? So, or the things that you'll come away with as you go through the process. So here, you'll be able to explain the usage of data from insight generation and visualization to being able to understand machine learning models using Python, and then which ones to apply. So not only is it a matter of just say understanding the fact that there are different types of machine learning models, but you'll understand which ones to apply in which types of situations. For example, supervised versus unsupervised learning techniques. So supervised learning techniques mean that you know the outcome, unsupervised means you don't. And so you'll learn what are those different techniques, when should you apply them, and then how do I use them, or what the results of them may be in order to improve your results and increase your confidence. And then understand data structures in Python. So again, as I said before, data is a big part of this. So being able to represent your data effectively so that you can use it to be able to drive your analysis process is going to be an important part of what we do. We'll also extract data from databases using SQL. So how you can get data from a structured query language environment or a relational database. And there are many types of databases available in the market today, but relational databases are probably the ones that you've heard the most about, SQL Server, Oracle, etc. And that's where a lot of data comes from these days. And so we think about how can we get that data out of those environments and then be able to use it for our analysis purposes. You'll also be able to write custom functions and code in Python. So what are some of the relevant libraries, for example, pandas and NumPy, in order to be able to manipulate data, but also we'll get into some visualization of data too, which is probably later. But in general, there's a wide variety of libraries that we can use within Python to be able to understand how can we apply the different types of libraries and functions that come as part of them in order to be able to drive our analysis forward. And then, of course, I talked earlier about data management. Well, if there's the all-important extract, transform, and load, if you haven't heard this term before, you'll hear it quite a bit within the data management space. But this is how you can get your data, transform it into data that is relevant for your analysis, and then put it into the load part is about putting it into a form that allows you to be able to perform that analysis. So loading it into a database, a table into Python so that it's able to be analyzed. And that's really what it's all about. And then we will touch on what's called data analysis expressions. So this is the ability to be able to use from Microsoft. This was an expression language that was created to support things like Power BI as well as Power Pivot to be able to perform these types of calculations. And there are some really interesting types of calculations that are available here. Some of them focus on things like being able to do year over year, month over month, quarter over quarter type comparisons dynamically without having to go through all of the arduous process of writing them on your own. We'll also talk about applying supervised and unsupervised learning models, as I described before, things like k-means clustering, for example, for unsupervised learning, or tree control algorithms for things like supervised learning. And then we'll do developing of dashboards within Power BI. So again, if it's not clear, you probably already know this, but I'm just going to refocus a little bit, is that when we think about consuming the types of analysis that we perform, we think about visualization. And so most of what you see in terms of analysis is going to be focused on the visual side of it. So you're going to want to create really key data visualizations and dashboards in order to be able to communicate the analysis that you performed so that your end users or your consumers have the ability to understand exactly what you're trying to communicate from an analyst perspective. And that'll be an important part. So Power BI is one way to do that. We'll also learn techniques in Python. And then we'll also get into neural networks. We'll use normalization to identify the best parameter settings. So you'll be able to tune the environment so that you understand how can you maximize the efficacy of your particular algorithm. And we'll do that in Python. Data wrangling and exploratory data analysis are about understanding what type of data do you have, what kinds of analysis can you provide. So these are all really important techniques as it relates to making sure that you understand what it means to be a data scientist, a data analyst, an expert in machine learning and data management. These are all important parts. And then finally, identify challenges and demonstrate best practices in implementing any machine learning model. As I said before, there's many, many different model types. We'll learn several of them, but there are so many that I can't even, cover them all. But within the context of supervised and unsupervised learning, and then I'll even add a third, which is focused on reinforcement learning models, which is kind of an unsupervised learning model technique, but generative AI is an important one that's come to the fray very clearly in the last few years. But that's what's called a reinforcement learning model because of the fact that we take data and then we learn from it. That's what's called reinforcement learning. So those are other techniques that we'll learn over time. Next slide, please. Okay, so the curriculum, it looks like a lot. It's 30 weeks, which is a long time. And we did cover a lot of things. So there's a lot to cover. And clearly, we want to take it slowly as we go through the process because we're learning so much. you have the opportunity to then get hands-on with many of the techniques that we'll be describing. So it's not just a matter of listening to lectures. There's a very much a hands-on component to this that you where you can use the programming language. You can use the programming techniques and some of the applications that we'll be going through in order to be able to learn how to apply these particular types of tools. So the course, though, is taught via video lectures from the NUS faculty, and these are from experts with more than 20 years of experience in the field. And it's segmented into three major sections, and we'll talk about those three sections in just a minute. But it aims to systematically equip you or give you the knowledge and skills that you need to implement machine learning and data analytics. And as I said before, apply these to your business, apply these to your domain, apply these within the environment that you will be using them in order to make sure that you can support the goals of your business, but also your own professional aspirations as you think about becoming a data scientist, data analyst, or focus more on analytical techniques. Next slide. Okay, so here are the three major sections. So section one is around analytics. It focuses from data to insights. And this kind of is the progression that you would typically think of. You have data, then you think about how to process that data, analyze the data, and then we get finally into machine learning. So it's sort of a progression as you think about this. So in the first section, we'll focus on just introducing what analytics is. We'll talk about data sources, where data comes from, data warehousing, and what data warehousing really is. As I mentioned earlier, DAX, or this dimensional expression language, allows us to be able to do things like time-based analysis. Data visualization we'll get into with things like Power BI, and then we'll talk about data mining basics. So an introduction to some of the different machine learning techniques that we'll be covering in later parts of the course. So it really is sort of this introductory model, which, and it's not just introductory, we'll actually be doing some really detailed things as it relates to that first section of the course, but it is your first introduction into the entire cycle of how data works. And so we'll sort of move through the storage of data assets all the way up through machine learning algorithms at the end. Section two then really gets us into programming with Python. So now this is where we start some of the programming as it relates to understanding how Python works and turning you into a programmer, if you will. And again, I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but more just thinking about how can I leverage the language in order to be able to express the kinds of analysis that I want to perform. And even though we're spending 30 weeks doing this, I've been programming in Python for well over a decade, and I learn things that are new every day. So I'm not going to tell you that you're going to be a Python expert by the end of this course, but you'll learn quite a bit about Python and you'll know exactly what to do. And it really gives you an amazing platform to be able to learn more. And I think that's the most important part of a course like this, is to give you a platform that allows you to be able to do more and learn more. Because that's exactly how I learn. I learn new things every day, where I focus on just being comfortable enough with the language that you can start to explore other kinds of things. One of the things that I'll talk about in office hours, for example, is how to use Kaggle, for example. Kaggle allows you to be able to take advantage of code that other people have written and then be able to understand how to apply it to solving a particular type of problem. And that's a great learning experience for you. And most of the work in Kaggle is done using Python. And we'll talk about those techniques. But here we'll talk about the basics of Python. We'll get into libraries and library functions. We'll talk about scikit-learn and Keras and other kinds of scientific libraries. We'll get into data visualization. We'll talk about how to do application development. And then learning for practical applications, we'll talk about machine learning, supervised learning, as I mentioned earlier. Unsupervised learning will be the other set of techniques that we'll be learning. Like, what are some of the different techniques that we'll be getting into? And so this is really where we get in pretty deeply into understanding some of the specifics as it relates to true machine learning techniques and how to apply them. And then finally, in the last section, we'll get into reinforcement learning. As I mentioned before, reinforcement learning is kind of what we think about in terms of generative AI. So remember, if you've been following along with Gen AI, and it's hard not to, you'll have learned that over the course of time, this is called reinforcement learning through human feedback. That is a reinforcement technique that generative AI uses. OpenAI applied it, Google applied it, et cetera. So there's a lot of different companies that are doing this. But basically, we'll talk about what some of those techniques are, and then we'll get into some of the recommendation system models, as well as what are some of the challenges that you might face as you think about these kinds of techniques into the future. Next slide. Okay, so here, as I mentioned, I sort of alluded to this just a little bit. I got into generative AI and what are some of the tools that are out there. So we will talk about, and again, this is neural network models. So if you're not familiar with the way generative AI works today, generative AI uses what's called a neural network model, but it also has a feedback loop. And so it's using feedback in order to be able to train the model or to incrementally make the model more effective. So we will talk about this as we move forward, and we will cover some modules as it relates to generative AI. We'll talk about generative AI tools. I'll show you several of them as we go. And then I also host master classes, and we talk about what are some of the generative AI techniques. And I'm updating this masterclass almost every month because things change or have been changing so quickly. And everybody's familiar with ChatGPT, and Google created something called Bard. Today it's called Gemini, as well as they have the Vertex platform, and there are other tools that are out there, for example. So we'll cover what some of the other techniques and tools that are out there. You hear from companies like Stable Diffusion, and Microsoft, of course, has their own model now today, Copilots and other kinds of generative AI tools that we'll talk about in more detail. So there's a lot going on in the space, but much of the course is related to understanding how did we even get here, and what are these techniques that are extremely relevant to understanding how we got to the point where generative AI is real and it provides us with business benefit. And if you think about it, especially as it relates to this, and I don't know if you've had the experience, but I'm sure many of you are using ChatGPT today. But you will find that the quality of the data is the most important part of understanding how the Copilot or the chat environment is able to support your questions. Okay, that's called prompt engineering. But in general, unless you give it quality data, it's really difficult for the AI system to be able to support the kinds of analysis that you're expecting. And the same thing is true when you think about a normal business. So we have to also think about, remember back when I was talking about the organization of the course, a lot of it had to do with understanding how to curate the data, understand the data, perform exploratory data analysis on the data. So a lot of that's going to be an important part of understanding how to apply these techniques, because at the end of the day, when we think about it, it's all about the data. And it may not sound exciting to think about storing data, but in general, when you have high quality data, your analysis can be very much higher quality. And so that's an important part of understanding how we think about the overall system. And that's why this course is great, because it does talk about all the different aspects of what you need to know in order to become successful in this particular area. Next slide. Okay, so I'll pass it back to you if you want, or you want me to cover program highlights quickly? Sorry.
Yes, you can cover the
Oh,
highlights and then I'll take it over.
okay, no
Yeah.
worries. Okay, so let's just go through the program highlights. So again, as I mentioned, no prior coding experience is required. So like, we're not expecting you to be a Java programmer, but at a minimum, just having a general understanding of what programming is, but you'll learn as we go. And as a matter of fact, when we start getting into this, one of the tools I like to use is called Google Colab. And interestingly, Google has built in a generative AI coding assistant. So not only do you not necessarily have to know coding, but you can also use a generative AI coding assistant to help you. And so it makes it even easier for you to learn coding, because now you can use generative AI to help you out there, which is really key, I think, as it works. Because I think about when I first learned Python, you know, well over a decade ago. And yes, I was a computer science major, so I did have computer science background. But in general, learning a new language takes time, and you have to read manuals and understand by creating a lot of code, and then of course a lot of syntax errors and fixing them. But today, that's so much faster now with these Copilot tools that help you move so much faster. Of course, premium school experience. NUS is a prestigious university, and having the ability to listen to professors from this area and to be able to help you to really understand the essence of what it is you would need to know in order to be successful is critical. And that's a really important part of this. Industry relevant curriculum. Many of the topics that I talked about before are topics that I use every day. So I work in the consulting arena. I work with customers every day. A lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what you'll be learning are very specific kinds of solutions that I provide to my customers every day. So the kinds of things that you'll be learning are definitely applicable within the business area. And so this is something that you want to make sure that you focus on, understand, and master, because as you go through the process, these will be the things that will make you successful. Distinguished faculty, of course, you'll be hearing from our distinguished faculty who have well over 20 years in the area. Of course, I also have a lot of experience in this area. I also teach at university. So you're being exposed to a lot of sort of academic expertise that can help you as well, not just professional experience, but also academic experience to help keep you on par with what's happening in the industry, and not so much as teaching you about the specific materials in this course, but also teaching you how to learn more effectively moving forward. So it's not just saying, here's 2 or 3 lectures that tell you about a particular topic area, but here are the tools that you need in order to continue to learn over time. Because that's really what I'm looking for, is to help you to continue to learn. How can you master a particular topic? And then as it changes, because we're in a very changing environment today, how can you continue to learn and continue to keep pace with the market? It's a very flexible mode of delivery. So here you can, it's asynchronous, at least from a lecture perspective. So you can consume it when you're ready and at your own pace. And so this allows you to be able to take advantage of the fact that these are recorded lectures. You can watch them over again if you really wanted to. If there's a particular area, you can pause them, go back, look at transcripts, etc. So a good learning experience. And then we will also have, which I think is another part of this, is, as I said before, we have weekly office hours where I will be interactive with you, just like we're talking today, and I will entertain your questions. I'll cover the topic areas if you want to get into a little bit more detail in terms of what was learned. And I tend to focus in the office hours more on the practical hands-on experience of the kinds of things that you should be learning about. And I think that's one of the most important ways to learn. Okay, so and there are, well, I said live and interactive sessions. So 4 live sessions with the faculty and 2 with industry experts from the faculty perspective, and then of course the office hours, as I mentioned before. Campus immersion. You'd be invited to attend a 1-day networking opportunity on campus with fellow global leaders to interact with program faculty and the director. So that'll be another important, if you're in the Singapore area, of course. It depends, because I think we have people coming from all over the globe. And unfortunately, since I'm in the United States, I probably won't make it for that session, but it will be a good opportunity to be able to network. I did talk earlier about the Capstone project, and toward the end of the program, you'll be able to demonstrate all of the skills that you have gathered over the course of this curriculum, and then be able to apply it in a real life situation. Now, it's not going to be specifically your business, but here it sort of helps you to understand, how can I apply this knowledge for a particular problem that's been given to me, and it'll help you to be able to understand what are some of those different techniques that I've learned. Do you feel comfortable applying them in order to be successful? And then, of course, modules on generative AI, including the applications. And some of this I will also go through as the curriculum. I'll show you, as for example, how to use a Copilot, for example. That's one area to focus on. And then the master classes and live case study discussions, which we'll also go through. as part of the course. So there's a lot in here. So over the course of 30 weeks, we'll be covering a lot. You'll be hearing from experts in the field. You'll be being exposed to the latest market tools and also being able to understand how to be a professional in this particular area. Okay, so I'll pass it off to you, Ankit, at this point.
Sure. Thank you so much, Carmen. Thank you so
Sure.
much for sharing those insights. I hope these were really helpful for all the participants in terms of getting a clarity on what exactly are the topics that are going to be covered here and how exactly they are going to be learning as well. Now, let me show an actual sample of the certification that the learners would be getting after completion of this course. As you can see, the certification is directly issued to you by NUS School of Computing, and there is no mention of Emeritus on that certification as well. Let me also give you some insights about the overall structure of the course and where exactly the course is going to be starting. So the course is starting on 23rd of December. The duration, as we already discussed, it's a 8 months course completely delivered to you online. The weekly commitment that we expect from you is around 6 to 8 hours per week. However, as there was also a note for the learners who are from complete non-tech background, we also recommend you to put in some additional efforts if that's something which is possible from your end. The program fee is 4,299 US dollars. Plus, for the Singaporean residents who currently reside in Singapore, there is a 9% GST which is also applicable. But first, you have to fill up an application form. To firstly, there is an application fee of $75 plus GST. You have to fill up your application form, go through the screening process, and then you can go ahead and finalize your seat by paying the tuition fee for the course. Now, for the participants who have actually joined the session today, I really want to thank you all for taking out time and joining the session. And as a token of appreciation from our end, we are offering you all an exclusive benefit. To know about this benefit, I request you all to kindly reach out to your program advisors. Your program advisors will definitely reach out to you all. And I would also request the team to, if in case they can, create a poll and they can share the poll where the learners can enter their details. And we will definitely make sure to reach out to you and help you with all your questions as well. Yep. So for all the folks who want to know a little bit about the exclusive benefit and you also have some queries, I would request you all to kindly enter your details in the poll below and we'll make sure to get in touch with you as soon as possible. We'll just keep the poll open for a minute and then we shall proceed with the Q&A session. So the poll is still open, guys. Feel free to drop your contact details. And as I told you, all our program advisors will make sure to reach out to you all. So let's begin with the Q&A session. Carmen, let's take up a few questions. I can already see there are learners who had some queries earlier as well. So they have a few questions that they had dropped in the chat box. I will also request the team to kindly open the Q&A tab so that learners can actually share their questions and get them answered from Carmen directly.
So, Ankit, I wasn't following the chat. Do you have the
Yeah.
questions from the chat window, if you wouldn't mind letting me know what they are. I was talking too much.
Sure. So just a moment, Carmen. Actually, I think the team
Okay,
is opening the Q&A tab,
no
and
worries.
I would request all the learners to share, ask their questions in the Q&A section. Anyone who has any questions, please feel free to drop your queries. I believe many of the participants had some questions, right? Arnold, if you want, you can share your questions here.
There's a couple appearing.
Yeah. 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 I'd like to take up a question, Carmen. There is a learner who has asked, would it be beneficial for someone who already has a degree in data science and business analytics?
Um, I think we'll be covering some specific tools. I guess the question would be, to what extent had you already maybe had Python exposure? And I would also say that the hands-on materials that we go through may be beneficial to you as you think about it. But if you already have a degree in data science, you may have been exposed to many of the areas that we are talking about. So I would look through the curriculum in a little more detail just to see if there are things that might be new to you, which might be beneficial overall. So that's what I would say there.
Thank you, Carmen. So we have another question. Any recommendation on tools that needs to be used for Python development, PyCharm or any other tools, which you would recommend?
Oh, well, we'll mostly be focusing on Jupyter Notebooks. So whatever variation of Jupyter Notebooks you feel most comfortable with, I think we'll be using Anaconda. We'll be using just about, well, we'll be using several different libraries as we go through this. And as I said before, I do really like Google Colab, which is a Jupyter Notebook environment that runs in Google with a built-in Gemini AI support. So that's what I typically would recommend in that area. There are other IDEs that are available out there as well. But we tend to focus on those two. But yeah, I'm sure there are others that you can use if you really want to. All you really need is a Jupyter Notebook interface.
Thank you, Carmen. Any other questions, guys? Anil, I saw that you had a question earlier. If you have any questions, please feel free to share your questions in the chat Q&A tab. We'll keep this open for another few minutes and we'll try to address all the technical queries directly with Carmen. In the meantime, our team is already addressing all the other questions related to the process and the delivery of the course. If you have any technical queries, guys, please feel free to share them with us right now. It's a golden opportunity for you to get it answered with someone from more than 25 years of experience in the industry. Yeah. How should a person with totally no background in tech and coding prepare for this course?
That's a good question. There are some reading materials that you can go through. I know when the course opens, there are some preparatory materials that you can go through. It is I would say, at least going through the modules, it may be a little more time commitment from the perspective of somebody with zero experience, but I would say so long as you keep up with the materials and follow along, you should be okay as you sort of move through the process. But usually I see people in the office hours that are maybe with no experience. They have more questions which help them to understand the basic materials. So it is certainly possible to be able to be successful here with without any experience. And I think the way that we have delivered these sessions, it gives you enough exposure to be able to keep along. But as I as I was saying earlier, you do need to ensure that you keep up with the material, because you're coming at it and you have zero experience with technology, then it's going to be new to you. So you may need to just focus a little bit more deliberately on understanding the materials as you go. But with that kind of motivation, you should be perfectly fine as you work through the materials. And as I said, the office hours help you to be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for taking out time and answering all those queries for us. And I still see that there are some few questions coming up. Hi, Carmen, please type the integrated environment tools in the chat group. Okay, I think the learner is asking about IDE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either Anaconda's one and Google Colab is the other.
Okay.
You can find both of those.
We have another question, Carmen. It's from Kent. He asks, is this course good for financial profession to perform some analysis or, for instance, discount cash flow?
Specifically as it relates to discount cash flow, probably not. We probably won't cover that exact use case, but you clearly can apply the techniques to your specific environment. And even, again, I'll go back to the office hours. If you have questions about what are some of the nuances that might be more related to your particular example, I can help you to understand what some of those might be. So not specifically within your particular domain, but in general, you can extrapolate to almost any domain from what I can see. And I have answered questions for people that have very specific use cases that they might want to discuss, for example, in the office hours.
Got it. We have one more question. If I did a different degree entirely in chemical engineering, would this certification alone help me find work in the technical field?
Well, I would like to have a really confident answer for that. It will definitely prepare you to be able to find a job. I can't guarantee, of course, that you would get a job in this area, but it is super popular today. And clearly having these skills is going to look really good on your resume or your CV, depending on how you look at it. And then also, it will give you the practical skills so that when you're in an interview and you need to talk about how would you apply a machine learning technique in order to solve a particular problem, you'll have a very good answer. So I can't guarantee that you'll find a job, but clearly it's going to prepare you so that you can be better positioned to find a job.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carmen. Guys, if there are any more questions, we will soon be closing this tab. I would request you to please go ahead, share your doubts, share your queries here. Any technical questions that you would like to get answered, be related to applications in various industries, in your own industry that you're working. If you're doing some analysis currently, please go ahead, drop your queries in the chat box. Yeah, we have one more question, Carmen.
Okay.
So, what are some common challenges faced when working with machine learning and data analytics, and how can we overcome them?
So yeah, well, I can cover a few of them. So number one, as it relates to machine learning, it's always how to understand which techniques to apply. So normally when you think about machine learning, I'll call this classical machine learning. So understanding, is it a supervised learning challenge? Is it an unsupervised learning challenge? Or now today, is it a generative AI challenge? So understanding how to approach a problem that you might be having is number one. So that's really the first common challenge. Then secondarily, do you have the data to be able to support the kinds of analysis that you want to perform? So you might determine that I want to perform a clustering analysis, for example, a k-means clustering analysis. Well, the second part of it is then to say, well, do I have data that is sufficient to allow me to be able to solve that problem? So you'll always see this sort of back and forth between data and the technique that you're using in order to help you to solve a business problem. So those are probably the biggest challenge that I think that we see back and forth is, do you have the data, and then do you know which techniques to apply in order to be able to give you the confidence to be able to say that you have created or identified a solution to your particular problem.
Yep. Thank you, Carmen. Any other questions, guys? We would be still keeping this tab open for another 1 minute. If you have any questions, please, I would request you to share those right away.
One thing,
Yeah.
Ankit, I'll just to say, the second part of the question that Arnold asked was related to how can you overcome them?
Yeah.
Well, the best way to overcome them is to understand the practical application techniques, and many of them we'll be talking about in the course. But so just understanding theory isn't usually enough for these kinds of to be able to overcome some of these challenges. So it's practical experience. It's being able to understand by practicing exactly what kinds of techniques work in different types of situations. So some of it's just a learning experience and getting exposure to help you to be able to solve those kinds of challenges. So last part of that.
I hope that answers your question, Arnold. If you have any more questions, please feel free to drop it right away, because for the interest of time, we would be closing the tab soon. Okay. So I think, Carmen, we can wrap the session up now. I think the learners have asked all the questions that they had. I hope everyone who attended the session were able to get their queries and doubts resolved. Thank you so much, Carmen. Thank you so much for joining the call and sharing those insights with us. And to all the participants who have also joined the call, thank you so much for taking out time and joining today. As I told you earlier, if you have any more questions, any more doubts, feel free to reach out to your program advisors. And we'll also make sure to reach out to each and every one of you to help you out with any further queries and doubts. Thank you all for joining, and you have a great evening ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.